It wasn't just cheap labor. It wasn't just currency manipulation. It wasn't even corporate espionage. It was the mechanical result of a dying monetary cycle. The rise of a new superpower is never an accident. It is a mathematical inevitability. When an incumbent empire abandons production for finance, it creates a vacuum, and physics dictates that a vacuum must be filled. The pattern is unmistakable. The arithmetic is merciless. History provides us with 3 perfect case studies. They prove that the transfer of global dominance follows a script written in debt, in hubris, and in the eventual revaluation of hard assets over paper promises. Consider the Spanish Empire in the 16th century. Under Philip II, Spain was the master of the world. Galleons flowed from the Americas, loaded with silver and gold. They had the ultimate reserve currency, but they made a fatal error. They confused money with wealth. Spain stopped manufacturing its own goods. Why build factories when you can buy everything? They outsourced production to the Netherlands, to France, to England. The influx of silver caused massive inflation, the price revolution. A shoemaker in Castile could no longer afford bread. While the elite adorned cathedrals in gold leaf, the productive capacity rotted away. The middle class was priced out of existence, and the empires that actually built things took the throne. The incentive was clear. Production beats consumption, just like the Spanish Empire. The British Empire followed the same trajectory. In 1914, the sterling was the sun around which the world orbited. London was the clearinghouse of global trade. But two world wars shattered the treasury. To maintain the illusion of power, Britain relied on debt. They prioritized the City of London's financial sector over the industrial heartlands of the North. By the 1960s, British factories were obsolete. Germany and the United States had modernized. Britain had not. The pound was devalued in 1967, a humiliation that signaled the end. A dock worker in Liverpool saw his purchasing power vanish overnight, not because he worked less, but because his leaders chose financial engineering over industrial reality. Just like the British Empire, the Roman Empire set the original precedent. From the reign of Nero to the crisis of the 3rd century, Rome stopped expanding and started consuming. The denarius was debasement in real time. They clipped the coins to pay for endless wars. And to pay for the grain dole, the bread and circuses required to keep the mob quiet. As the currency lost value, inflation soared. The wealthy fled the cities for fortified estates, buying land, hoarding gold, leaving the urban poor to face the collapse. The legions were no longer citizens fighting for home. They were mercenaries fighting for pay. And when the pay became worthless, the borders fell. The pattern repeats in 7 distinct stages. Stage 1 is the era of good money where value is backed by hard assets. Stage 2 is the expansion of public works and infrastructure. Stage 3 is massive military dominance and economic prosperity. Stage 4 is the turning point where the empire engages in wars. It cannot fund through taxation alone. Stage 5 is the debasement of currency to cover the deficit. Stage 6 is the loss of faith in the currency and a flight to hard assets. Stage 7 is the collapse of the old order and the transfer of power to a rising challenger. Just like Rome, Spain, and Britain before it, the United States has moved firmly into the late stages of this cycle, creating the exact conditions required for China's ascent. Since the 1990s, while the West focused on Stage 5 financialization and debt expansion, China executed stages 1 through 3 with ruthless efficiency. Think about what that means. While New York focused on derivatives, Shanghai focused on steel. While the Federal Reserve expanded its balance sheet to bail out banks, Beijing expanded its physical footprint to secure copper, lithium, and oil. The data confirmed this transfer. In 1990, the US produced nearly a quarter of the world's manufacturing output. Today, China is the world's factory, accounting for over 30% of global manufacturing, while the US share has withered. This is not a political statement, it is a structural reality. The challenger has absorbed the industrial base the incumbent discarded. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, China has replicated the British imperial strategy of controlling trade routes and ports not with armies but with infrastructure loans. They have positioned themselves at the center of the physical supply chain. The incentive for the global south is no longer to hold dollars, but to trade in the currency of the nation that actually builds their bridges and buys their soy. Current data suggest we are witnessing the pivot point. The technological leap in Shenzhen rivals Silicon Valley. The military expansion in the South China Sea mirrors the U.S. emergence in the Caribbean. A century ago, the strategic challenger has moved from imitating to innovating, particularly in hypersonics and artificial intelligence. Some economic historians note the counterargument that China faces a demographic cliff and a massive internal debt bubble. They argue this will stall their rise. This is a valid observation, but it misses the geopolitical gravity of the situation. A declining power with a printing press is often less stable than a rising power with a demographic problem. The incentive for a rising power facing internal pressure is often external aggression or accelerated expansion to secure resources. History shows that demographic decline does not happen overnight, but currency failures can happen over a weekend. China has spent 30 years accumulating gold reserves and tangible assets hedging against the very paper system the West relies on. The endgame approaches in one of three ways. First, a controlled decline. This is the multipolar outcome. The US dollar loses its monopoly, but remains a major player sharing the stage with a commodity-backed yuan or a BRICS basket. This results in a slow, grinding reduction in Western living standards as import costs rise. Second, a chaotic collapse. This involves kinetic conflict, when the incumbent realizes the economic war has lost the rational move. Under extreme constraints is often to flip the table. A confrontation over Taiwan or trade routes forces a hard decoupling, shattering the global economy and forcing a rapid, painful reorganization of alliances. Third, a reset and restructure. A new global monetary accord is reached similar to Bretton Woods, but with the East dictating the terms. Gold or a neutral reserve asset is revalued to clear the debt, wiping out the savings of those holding paper currency while rewarding those holding real assets. In 1940, for the British pound handed the torch to the US dollar. In 2024, the structural pressure for another handoff is immense. The only variable is timing and pain. Subscribe to the channel, study history, for it is the only roadmap we have. Focus on resilience, not speculation. We are watching the wheel turn.